I mean, straight away we could see that there was discomfort about blocking people from getting to work, and they didn't want to be in that situation. It's just that, all the previous things they've tried, they've been on a march from A to B, they've signed petitions, they've written to their politicians, etc. And none of that had worked really. So it very much felt like a last resort.
The other side of talk of energy is, of course, the environment and climate change, and a new Netflix documentary exploring the story of Extinction Rebellion has just landed. And it's really interesting because it tells a very honest story about the beginnings of the organisation and the disagreements within the leadership. Here's a wee clip of the trailer.
Joining XR was feeling for the first time like anything was possible.
Section 14 place, no protests allowed.
The government's bill says that those who cause annoyance could be jailed for up to 10 years.
It's expanding police powers, it's politicised protests, really a silencing bill.
Well, joining us now is one of the filmmakers behind the project, Maia Kenworthy. Welcome to the show, Maia.
Hi, hello, thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So how did you get involved with this film and with the organisation? Are you a member of Extinction Rebellion, or did you come at it as a filmmaker rather than an activist?
Yes, definitely came at it as a filmmaker. I made this film with my friend Elena. We're both independent filmmakers. Neither of us had ever been involved in activism ourselves. We basically met the co-founders back in 2018 when the group was launching, and through a friend, essentially. She'd gone along to one of their meetings, thought they seemed interesting, and did a call out to filmmaker friends to sort of come and meet them as well. So we went along and basically, I think, had a lot of assumptions about activism and the sorts of people that would be doing it. And we realized quite quickly that there were a lot of different people in the room, people we didn't expect. And we were just very curious. And of course, then they had this big plan to have a rebellion in central London. And we thought, well, that sounds interesting. Maybe we'll stick around and see what happens. So we just kept showing up basically with our cameras. And in those early days, we also met Farhana Yamin, who's this environmental lawyer that's been at the heart of the UN for decades. And she really wasn't what we expected to join a group like this. I think I sort of naively thought that she would be part of a process that was sort of solving things, and they had it all under control. And so then to hear her say, actually, I'm very disillusioned with this whole process, and politicians are not listening to, those agreements they've signed up to at these conferences. Instead, they're going home and putting fossil fuel interests first. She was very frustrated, and she just threw everything into this new group, Extinction Rebellion. And so we thought, wow, this is not what we expected. And to see such different people working together, we thought, well, surely something's going to come from this. We didn't really know, but
well, I mean, your gut feeling, the feeling in your waters was obviously very correct, because Extinction Rebellion has really sort of stimulated activism. Whatever you think of Extinction Rebellion, they've definitely put climate change back on the agenda. Some of the protests they've done, some of our listeners will, be very angry with what they've done, but many people will say, look, they have got things on the agenda. But I imagine that the sort of tensions at the heart of the group, because how did you find that? Was that where there was some really interesting, I suppose, sort of tensions, Maia?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we realized is that that's probably inevitable in every social movement, right? If you're bringing together lots of different people who come from, different walks of life, have different ideas, perspectives, experiences, etc., you're going to get that tension. And it's part of also what can create a successful movement, right? Because they're bringing their different experiences to the table. So I think it's something to not actually sort of worry about too much and think, well, I'm not going to get involved because it's difficult to navigate all of that. And actually that was what we respected in the people that we were following, is that they could see it was tricky to navigate, but they rolled up their sleeves and they got involved, and, change came out of that messiness. It's just something I think to accept, basically, rather than...
And were they quite happy for you to have access all areas, even when there were some of these disagreements going on? Yeah,
I think it's sort of, when it became clear that we were very much there, just documenting stuff, letting stories unfold, we weren't, coming in with a clear, an agenda of this is what we want to get, and we weren't doing a parachute number, right? And then off we go and spin our story. We were just there documenting it. In a sense, we felt like historians, I guess, And so I think once people realized we weren't there to just sell their story, to the press, and we were just genuinely interested in capturing what was happening. It just set them at ease, and yeah, we're just Maia and Elena. So
Maia, with this documentary, obviously you're touching quite a controversial topic with the Extinction Rebellion. Are you expecting as much criticism as you are praise, and are you prepared for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was what we realized early on with following this group, is that they were, and I think that's the deal with civil disobedience generally, they were going to be unpopular. They were unpopular, they have been, and that's just part and parcel of doing this work, I think. And as we're telling their story, yes, of course, we're expecting some people to push back and not be super fans. And I think that's okay. Yeah.
And how long did you spend with them filming, Maia?
We, so from 2018, end of 2018, all through 2019 into 2020, then obviously the pandemic came along. So we really went into the edit then, sort of summer of 2020. But the main interviews we did actually in 2021, which was good because then people had time to really reflect on what happened and the parts of the story that we weren't there for, because a lot of the film is observational footage, of course, because we were very much there while it was all happening, but there were things that we didn't capture. And so then in interview, that created a space for people to really open up and talk about things that maybe we weren't present for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting time period that you've covered there, because that's really Extinction Rebellion coming into its own and grabbing a lot of headlines and attracting a lot of controversy at times. Do you feel that some of the leaders did go on a bit of a journey? Do you think there's things that they regretted doing in terms of some of the civil disobedience?
Yeah, I think and I think that's another thing that we saw being on the inside, is that there is humility amongst activists. I think quite often, they get a bad rep for being on their high horses, thinking they have all the answers, knowing best, preachy, worthy, etc. And, actually we found that there's a lot of honesty about things that are not going so well and trying to work it out and muddling through. And so people were open about that with us, and that actually made them more likable.
Yeah, I think likable is such a good word, because I think sometimes the narrative, sometimes fairly, probably quite a lot of unfairly, is that a lot of these protesters are very unfeeling about the intended or unintended consequences on other people's lives. We hear all these stories about, other people either not being able to get to work, or more serious things about people not being able to get to hospital in time for things. When you were interviewing those people, did you get the sense that they were dwelling on these stories and they did feel sort of upset about the kind of human cost of their activity as well?
Yeah, I mean, definitely some of those early protests that we filmed, I mean, straight away we could see that there was discomfort about blocking people from getting to work, and they didn't want to be in that situation. It's just that, all the previous things they've tried, they've been on a march from A to B, they've signed petitions, they've written to their politicians, etc. And none of that had worked really. So it very much felt like a last resort for these people. And they really, it's coming from a place of care, but they were obviously, seeing the reactions it was provoking in the public, and did feel a lot of, guilt and pain around that. But, they just felt we have to do this because we've got nothing else at this point. And actually on the ambulance point, one of the first things we went along to was a non-violent direct action workshop, and they were very clear about the fact that we can always get out of the way for an ambulance. There's no need to block an ambulance, and that's always been a consistent thing that they talk about and that they do. I don't think that's actually never happened. That often gets spun in the media, but they are very clear about not blocking ambulances.
And it's been really interesting with all this discussion about the energy crisis, and it does feel like we are now talking about both weaning ourselves off fossil fuels, but also opening up more fossil fuels as well, possibly with North Sea oil. I mean, can you see XR sort of ramping up their activity again soon, Maia? Do you think they'll feel that now is a really important point for them to re-enter the sort of big discussion? Yeah,
I think they definitely are feeling that. I mean, we're not across it anymore, but clearly it is a time to protest, because we do have a government that is looking at opening up new oil sites in the North Sea, which is ridiculous because it takes something like 28 years on average from exploration to production. So that's what takes us to 2050, at a time when we're meant to be at net zero. And also the government has admitted itself that that new oil is not going to help with our fuel bills at the moment. So yeah, I think that there's a lot with the climate crisis and the cost of living crisis. There is a lot to protest about and hold our government accountable for. Absolutely.
Well, we're really grateful for your time, Maia. It's a really interesting conversation and a really interesting documentary. Thanks very much for speaking with us.